Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits.
Chemistry tonight is electric.
As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight. A new survey has revealed the Reform Party poses the biggest threat to the Tories at the next election. This comes as the dominoes may be beginning to fall, with the billionaire Nick Candy becoming the party's treasurer. The press regulator Ipso has upheld a complaint against The Spectator, firmly placing itself on one side of the transgender debate, a decision it will come to regret. Once again, justice is under threat from activist judges. The former Lord Chief Justice has suggested abandoning juries as a means of clearing court backlogs. Plus, the decline of the Parish Church has been exposed by a new report which points the finger at the Church of England for mismanaging the local institutions. State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my most pugnacious panel, the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the journalist and author, Michael Crick. As ever, it's a crucial part of the programme. Let me know your views, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now, it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Sophia Wensler.
Jacob, thank you. Good evening. It's just gone 8 o'clock. Your top story from the GB newsroom. The UK and Germany have reached a landmark deal to tackle migrant smuggling. Germany has agreed to tighten laws, making it easier to prosecute smugglers behind small boat crossings to the UK. The deal also focuses on intelligence sharing and removing smuggling content from social media to disrupt criminal networks. Independent MP Iqbal Mohammed has spoken out against a proposed ban on first-cousin marriages in the UK, calling the move unnecessary and unenforceable. Speaking in the Commons, Mr Mohammed acknowledged the health risks, but stressed the need for a cultural shift, not legislation, to address the issue. He did condemn forced marriages and virginity testing, highlighting the need to protect women's rights. However, the MP for Dewsbury and Batley argued that banning first-cousin marriages would not solve the problem. A government department spent almost £1,200 of taxpayers' money on 2 ministerial folders. That's according to official figures. It comes as Chancellor Rachel Reeves has today launched a crackdown on government waste. The Department for Culture, Media and Sport bought the folders at a cost of £594 each from luxury leather goods manufacturer Barrow Hepburn & Gale, which also supplies the royal family. Meanwhile, folders are available in the House of Commons shop for £30. The alleged killer of a US health insurance boss has tussled with police officers as they were escorting him to court. Luigi Mangione, in handcuffs, shouted to reporters outside the Pennsylvania courthouse.
Completely out of touch and an insult to the intelligence of the American people and the lived experience.
With murder after United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was gunned down in a targeted attack in New York last week. Police arrested Mangione at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania after a customer recognised him from media reports. To Ilford now, where firefighters are tackling a blaze in Leigh Street. It's after a video emerged online showing the moment that the house seemed to explode before it erupted into flames. 8 fire engines and around 60 firefighters are at the scene, and the roof and the first floor of the 2-storey property are alight. The London Fire Brigade says Leigh Street is closed between Easton Avenue and Vicarage Road, and they're asking the public to avoid the area. And the fathers of 2 murdered policewomen have hailed the new Elizabeth emblem as a fitting tribute to their daughters and others who have died in the line of duty. Bryn Hughes and Paul Bone both received the emblem from the King during the first presentation of the awards following the deaths of their daughters, PC's Nicola Hughes and Fiona Bone, who were murdered after answering a 999 call. Charles spent an hour with the families of public servants, chatting about the loved ones they lost and handing over the nation's gratitude in the form of the emblem. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. In recent weeks, the Reform Party has not only seen defections from former Tory MP Andrew Jenkins and former Tory strategist Tim Montgomery, but today it emerged the property tycoon and billionaire Nick Candy defected from the Tories to Reform too, becoming its treasurer. And of course, all this comes as Reform has overtaken the Labour Party in the polls, firmly in second place behind the Tories. The vote in a two-party system is split 3 ways. Today, a new poll for Conservative Home has shown 7 in 10 Conservative Party members think Reform poses the biggest challenge to the Tories at the next election. Well, Vox Populi Vox Dei, the voice of the people is the voice of God, and the people, as so often, are right. Reform poses a serious conundrum for the Tory party. With a mere 121 seats in the House of Commons, the Conservatives cannot afford to have a split right of centre vote at the next election. Yet this need not be so. Most Tory party members share the concerns and values of those in Reform. There was a failure to govern as Conservatives, which Kemi Badenoch has admitted to. So, to win back voters, the Tory party, lo and behold, needs to be Conservative again. This could open the way for some form of cooperation between the two parties. If each fights the other, then the left could win, and the first 5 months of a Labour government show quite how undesirable that is. Reform will not want to do a deal with the soggy left-leaning establishment Tory party that accepts the status quo. If it does a deal with anyone, it will be with a party that stands up for our shared Conservative values. Fundamentally, the ambitions of the two parties are the same. Both parties want dramatically to decrease migration, to exercise our newfound sovereignty in a post-Brexit Britain, to align more closely with the US over the EU, to cut the size of the state, reduce taxes, and unleash our latent growth. If the two parties remain divided, the danger of the Labour supermajority remains. But if we work together, according to current polling, the Reverend Keir Starmer's Labour Party could be destroyed in 5 years' time. As ever, let me know your views, mailmog@gbnews.com. But I'm now joined by the Deputy Leader of Reform, Richard Trice, as well as my most pugnacious panel, the former editor, The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the journalist and author Michael Crigg. Richard, let me turn to you first. A few years ago, I was very keen to support you in becoming the Conservative candidate for Mayor of London. Now, we had Theresa May in charge at the time, so I'm afraid you were vetoed and my support probably didn't help. But there's remarkably little that you and I disagree on politically, policy-wise. Aren't we just harming each other by being in opposite parties?
Jacob, you're quite right. That's because you're a real Conservative. But as you've just admitted in your monologue, that actually the Conservative Party is a soggy, left-leaning sort of establishment bunch of folk that actually doesn't want those real Conservative values that can make the economy grow. So I think you're sort of slightly... You're now actually in danger of being in no man's land, Jacob, and I want to give you that warm, welcoming embrace to reform.
But when I go and address Conservative associations in the country, they are all on our side. The Conservative Party as an institution is on our side.
Because the members are real Conservatives.
Yes.
Your parliamentary party, former colleagues, are soggy, left-leaning Lib Dems who are a bit confused.
I'm not trying to defend the last couple of years of the Conservative government. Even Kemi Badenoch, leader of the Conservative Party, has said that we talked right and acted left. But Kemi actually is a Conservative. She's not a drippy person at all. I mean, I think if you dared call her drippy, we'd get a pretty robust answer. Shouldn't we be thinking about how we can make things work, and that actually reform is important because it makes sure the Conservative Party remains Conservative?
Well, that's right, because a Conservative principle is the belief in competition, and competition's a great thing, because what we're seeing as we go up in the polls and as great business people like Nick Candy defect from the Tory party, Andrea Jenkins, Dame Andrea, she's defected, another former Tory MP, Aidan Burley defected today. People are saying, actually...
Aidan Burley, wasn't he the one who dressed up in unfortunate...
Well, I mean, people can dress in all sorts of things. The point is, he's a former Conservative.
Yeah, you're
people
right.
Are coming our way.
He made one mistake, right?
And the point is...
all of us, even
I'll accept that.
The real point is that real Conservatives are coming our way, and I think it's great that we've got three parties and a two-party system. It's competition. And it may well be that we destroy the Labour Party. But if there is not competition out there, then real principles and values and real options as to how to make this economy grow again and make people better off won't be on the table.
But do you think that if, come the next election, the split of the vote between Reform and the Conservatives gives us another 5 years of Keir Starmer, that is a price worth paying for competition?
The polls are now showing there are three parties in the 20s. Give or take, that's about egalite. We're the party with momentum. We're the party that people are excited about. If we keep moving north...
But actually, the poll also showed that if you turned that into seats, the Conservatives and Reform would still be short.
We're only 6 months in. We're the party with momentum. Roll forward 6 to 12 months. We'll be at 30%. The Tories and Labour were down in the sort of 25s, low 20s. And then, actually, I mean, it's great, isn't it? Isn't it exciting to get this change? That's why lots of people are joining us.
I think the change...
100,000 members plus, young people excited by reform.
Across British politics is exciting.
Yes.
But the SDP had momentum. It got to 50% in the polls.
Yeah, but they were soggy left. You know, we don't want this soggy left stuff.
They had momentum. They had momentum in the 1980s. And all they did was destroy Labour. I mean, from my point of view,
they never established branches, they never stood thousands of people in candidates, and that's what we're now doing as we professionalise, and it's amazing.
Panel, Kelvin, where do you think this leaves the Conservative Party?
I think they're in a degree of trouble in a couple of important areas. First of all, the voters are not going to forgive them in a heartbeat. So that's what you're betting. That's what you're gambling on. Or Conservative people who believe in conservatism in the old Conservative Party, they're not going to forgive them. It was beyond a shambles, and it wasn't just 2 years either. Let's be honest about it. I mean, Cameron from day one basically lined up soldiers and shot them. He did not want a defence. He thought defence was something you could cut. And now look where we're going to be today. It's beyond shocking. So I also think the thing that with the SDP was, it was a fantastic thing. OK, but remember, we're going into a county council. This is where I think Reform is strong. They're going to be strong in local councils, strong in county councils, and come Wales, Wales is going to be enormous. And that's where I think this is different from what has happened before.
But Michael, you're the expert on candidates and where people are standing. Do you think Reform can get the depth to get not just candidates, but candidates who don't blow up in time for the county council elections?
Probably not. I mean, Richard's party had a lot of trouble with some of its candidates at the election. Indeed, there was seemed to be a little row going on between him and Nigel over the quality of the candidate control that had been going on under his regime.
But Michael, the Green Party had even more trouble.
Well, I know.
But you in the media didn't report that because it didn't suit you.
But Richard, that's the facts of life. That you are a right-wing party, you will be under more scrutiny.
Excellent. We like scrutiny, and we will get better and better at doing all this process. Here's the point, though. When we get things wrong, we admit it, learn from it, and try not to make the same mistake again.
For example,
Unlike
one of your MPs,
parties.
had an assault conviction which didn't emerge until and may have emerged internally.
But Labour cabinet minister had a conviction as well.
I know. I didn't emerge. But this is one of 5. So
what happened to a Labour chief whip? Suddenly disappeared. So I think we can always pick out the little things, but on the big things, isn't it true that whatever's going on, Reform seems to be able now to pick out winners? Montgomery coming aboard, the Dame coming aboard.
Tim Montgomery, I think, is an asset. Andrea Jenkins, a lot less so.
Andrea Jenkins is a great asset. She's going to win.
Even less
she's going to win the mayoralty in the county of Lincolnshire.
And I always think that you can see the way the weather is by which direction the defections are in. People start defecting the other way. That's good. Kemi Badenoch has only been in office 6 weeks or something. She needs to establish herself. She hasn't done yet, and that will take time. Whereas, of course, Nigel Farage has been a leader of the party for about 20 years.
How long do you have to establish yourself as a new party leader?
Well, I think you've really got it. It's a matter of months, and really what happens in May will be fascinating. Not just in the locals, but some of those mayoral elections, like the one in Lincolnshire, where interestingly your party, the Conservatives, selected a candidate the other day who beat 3 former MPs who failed to get the nomination. And I think at the grassroots, your party is taking against people who are associated with the past, which is where you may have problems getting back into Parliament. You chose a former...
At the end of the day, voters will not forgive the Conservative Party for what they did, the lies they told, election after election on immigration, which has made us... Mass immigration has made us all poorer, has changed the quality of our life. And they won't be forgiven for that for many years.
But I also see one other thing happening. I saw a poll tonight, the latest UCUB approvals rating, right? 59% do not approve of Starmer, right? And that is 4% worse than after his reset. So he announces the reset, and they say, is that it? Boom.
So I didn't see that poll. What did it say about Farage? That'd be interesting, because traditionally, Nigel Farage has had... I mean, that's why it took him 8 goes to get into Parliament, because more people dislike Farage than like him. I think he's done a lot to improve that in the last 12 months. Yeah. Your big problems, 2 big problems. One is you lack talent. There's Nigel Farage, and arguably you, Richard, but you haven't got many talented people.
You said we lack talent.
The other thing is your votes.
We've got 100% talent in our parliamentary party, and that's fantastic. And that's why we're making more noise than 120 MPs in the opposition.
But the other problem you have is your votes are more evenly spread, a bit like the Lib Dems.
Are you seriously suggesting that Holly Valance is not talent? I mean, one of the most talented singers we've ever seen. So we've got great talent coming through the party.
But she thought I should be Conservative Prime Minister. So her views aren't necessarily always supportive of UKIP.
You'd have been a lot better than all the alternatives that actually came up, and that's why the party went so wrong. That's why you now need to join us, Jacob, because we're real. We've got those real values.
It's going to be fascinating watching this argument going. At the end of the day, it's all about who's going to be the leader. Is the Conservative Party going to accept Nigel Farage taking over as leader, or is your party going to accept Kemi Badenoch taking over as leader of this coalition of parties that this pact that you're proposing?
It would be there is no doubt that the following wind in this argument is towards some kind of coming together, some kind of agreement, right, prior to an election.
We can't come together with a bunch of Lib Dems.
No, I agree. my local MP is Ben Spencer. Oh, my God, how awful, right? And
there you are. You've made my case for me.
And this is in Weybridge, right, OK? A Tory MP, you bring a tear to a glass eye. However they... So the Conservatives have got lots of duds in there.
So you're a bit harsh, and he's not here to defend himself.
He is my local MP, so I do see what he does for us, right?
I expect he's very hardworking.
Well, that's what hardworking for himself. I see he's now a shadow cabinet minister, I think.
But this is the point. This is the point.
But Kemi Badenoch... Ben Spencer's not here to defend himself, so...
Kemi Badenoch has surrounded herself with people from the left of the party, And I think that's very significant.
Oh, hold on. I mean, that's not entirely true.
Well,
Andrew Griffiths is not on the left of the party. Priti Patel is shadow foreign
But if you look at the likes of Mel Striding,
Mel Stride's from the left of the party. That's true.
And in the critical roles, I think it's a cabinet. I mean, you look at Jesse Norman. These are people from the puke green side of the party.
Well, that's because the Conservatives need to gain the votes of people who are centrist Conservatives.
No, we don't. No, we don't.
That's why we did so well.
Come to power just on hardline right-wing votes in this country.
Where we lost votes was to reform and to people staying at home. We lost 1% of our votes to the Lib Dems, and more than half of those supported Brexit. No, the idea that we win by going further to the left is for the birds. We destroy ourselves.
Well, I would say the complete
Richard
reverse.
eats all our lunch if we do that.
You can win together, you can both win by going further to the
all
right.
Well, on these culinary matters, we'd better move on. So thank you very much to my brilliant panel and to Richard. After the messages from our sponsors, we'll be looking at the latest decision from the press regulator that poses a serious threat to freedom of speech.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Maria, potholes are the bane of everybody that uses the road, whether you're a car driver or a cyclist. As a cyclist, are even worse. How have we got into this situation where our roads are in such a bad state?
Well, part of it is to do with actually our climate. In somewhere like, say, Sweden, like the snow will fall on the ground, it will stay there for months. Whereas here we've got what's called a freeze-thaw climate, where the water comes down, then we might have a cold snap and it freezes, and the water within the pothole will then expand and make the pothole bigger. Then we might have a mild spell, and then that process repeats. So, we do actually need extra funding to acknowledge the fact that, we just live in a climate where we're sort of particularly vulnerable to potholes.
Why? I mean, the fact that this happens, these weather conditions happen, is no great surprise to anybody. Why has the problem been ignored for so long?
I think what's happened is we've had, short-term funding. So it's like, oh, there's a pothole, let's patch it up. Oh, there's another one, let's patch it up. But the patches aren't actually really that strong, so then they break down again. So, really what we need is to have roads completely resurfaced, and then they'll just be pothole-free for a very long time. And that really is how funding should be. That's the direction funding should go in, as opposed to just sort of dribs and drabs here and there.
Do you think this government are going to be good for the motorist, or is there indeed a war on the motorist still?
The different parties come in and they've all got different policies that they wheel out, then they cancel the policies, and then there's so much lack of transparency. Like, for example, with the pothole issue, sometimes the government, whichever government is in office, will do some big showboating about how they're going to give X amount of potholes, and you still think that sounds really good.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg, in case you've forgotten, and we were discussing the Reform Party, and the male Moggs have come in. Margaret says they must unite to beat Labour next time, but which leader will submit to the other? And Trevor, there has to be some electoral pact between Reform and the Conservatives, or they will split the right vote again and Labour will be re-elected. And Robert, the Conservative Party moved to the left and they no longer represent right-wing thinkers. They're also addicted to infighting and they are split from top to bottom and they have lost the young people. I don't know, my children are quite conservative, they're young. Anyway, in the wake of the Leveson inquiry, the press regulator, the Independent Press Standards Organisation, was established, and its recent decision to uphold a complaint against The Spectator is Orwellian. Earlier this year, Spectator columnist Gareth Roberts described a transgender woman, that is to say a man, who interviewed Nicola Sturgeon, as a man who claims to be a woman. Incredibly, after said man, who claimed to be a woman, complained to Ipso, it concluded the remarks were a breach of Section 12, which states the press must avoid prejudicial or perjorative references to an individual's protected characteristics. I'm joined now by my most pugnacious panel, the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the journalist and author, Michael Crick. Michael, let me come to you first. Ipso was set up to avoid state regulation, which was being proposed by the coalition. And it's independent of the state and it's funded by the newspapers. How much do the newspapers take its criticisms seriously of this kind, or is it in itself a threat to freedom of speech?
Well, I don't really know how much the newspapers take it seriously. I don't work for newspapers, and you don't hear about it that often. I mean, they don't have to belong to Ipso. I mean, Michael Gove, the editor of The Spectator, who is complaining about it, I mean, I think Gove got a point. I think it's a silly judgment. Ipso, or press regulators, are meant to deal with people like Kelvin when he was editing The Sun.
Yeah, disgraceful.
And people who are cavalier with the facts and steal, other interviews from other people and so on. I remember Kelvin telling me that, page one was known as Plage One in his day. In fact, he said it on this programme. But no, but seriously, it's meant to deal with much more serious issues than this. And, of course, phone hacking is what led to Leveson. And, of course, it was not Kelvin, but his successors on both the Sun and the News of the World who did all that, and other papers too.
Not on the Sun. Not that I know of on the Sun. Anyway.
I thought there was some on the Sun, but forgive me if I'm wrong.
No.
But there was interaction
anyway,
with
the News
staff
of the World was full of it,
and within the group. And so, I mean, this is real trivial stuff, and I think it was justified. It was rude of the columnist to say it. But I think he should be allowed to say it, particularly in the context of a discussion about gender, which is what he's writing about. Now, I haven't seen the rest of the article, but it seems to be in that context, journalists are entitled to be rude.
But is that right? Or should Ipso be there to maintain standards of decency and protect individuals from nasty comments?
Well, I suppose there comes a point where comments can be so nasty that perhaps they should be in charge. But I don't think this gets anywhere near that point.
And this person...
And I think they've got better things to be doing, frankly.
This person had a gender recognition certificate. So does that mean, should we all accept, if somebody has a gender recognition certificate, that person is the sex that the gender recognition certificate states? Or are we entitled to say that we think the whole thing is nonsense?
Well, there will be people who don't accept that the gender recognition.
But are we allowed to say so?
I think we are allowed to say so. Yes, I think it's an infringement of freedom of speech. So if you're not allowed to say so, and I mean, it's also silly because there's no penalty for The Spectator over this. All they have to do is print the judgment. The Spectator could withdraw from Ipso if it wants to. It's the original offence was pretty trivial, and actually, the reaction to the story itself is not that important, I don't think.
Oh, I don't agree with that. I have no idea why Ipso exists at all, why we have any kind of press regulation. We have laws in our country, homophobia or whatever you like, and because somebody says something rather disobliging about somebody, have you ever been online? Why should print be held to a different judgment to the socials? Well, the socials, the stuff written about me, and the stuff I sometimes write about other people. By the way, Ipsos, on that basis, would actually be full of work for millions of years.
But the reason why we have we have a system of regulation or self-regulation, it's been up to now, really, is because certain newspapers come out with very, very damaging stories that aren't true. They invade people's privacy.
You've got the laws of libel. You've got the laws of...
You know perfectly well that resorting to the laws of libel, if you are a poor person or you're just... It's only rich people who can afford...
If it's untrue, man, you're done for. Let me tell you, newspapers will settle at 1,000,000 miles an hour. No, print is now held to a ridiculously high standard.
It's not only print. This was one of the great flaws of the Leveson inquiry, that it didn't really understand that internet publishing was coming. So the Spectator, because it has a print outlet, is caught on its internet productions. This article was only on the internet, as I understand
didn't know
it,
that.
and it's still caught. Whereas if it was only an internet publication, it wouldn't have to worry about Ipso at all.
Yeah, it's interesting. That should be the case, because in the television world, television programmes, like the one I used to work for, Channel 4, would say things online that they would never say on air, simply because Ofcom only regulated the on-air stuff. So, but going back to your point, it's all very well saying, oh, well, they can resort to libel. But people don't want to have their lives dragged through the courts. That's what they're thinking. I know most libel cases never get to court, but people don't want to resort to libel.
They never go to... I don't know how many...
I know, but
the only battle I've seen lately involved was Waggatha.
Your victims, and you had many in your time, your victims don't know that.
And myself, I wrote a cheque only the other day. You know, every so often something goes wrong, and you have to pay. And honestly, I hesitate to think how much, even today, that News Corporation or DMGT would be paying out. There are lots of protections, legal and commercial, for everybody. The idea that anybody would spend a nanosecond worrying about that. But of course, there are strange people, and that the lady wanted to make that, I think she is a lady, yes, wanted to make that complaint. And that's how we get. So we get Ipso, and that they make fools of themselves by making this judgment.
But should Ipso be regulating opinion, is I suppose at the heart of it? Because this is just somebody with an opinion that may or may not be disagreeable. It's not factually correct or incorrect. It's a view as to whether a gender recognition certificate is valid.
In the world we're in now, actually, the strange thing is, facts are not as important as opinions. Right? Yeah. In the world, in the social media world, an opinion actually has a lot of interreaction, but a fact is of no consequence.
And in this case, the Spectator columnist was writing about this person on the issue of gender. If it had been, just a sort of gratuitous insult, and they were talking about something else, there might be more of a case for it, but not in this way.
Which Ipso specifically prohibits. You're not allowed to reference a protected characteristic unless it's relevant to the story.
So supposing you said that now, supposing you said that about Juno, right, and you said da-da-da, da-da-da, what would happen? Would you find yourself in trouble with Ofcom?
I've no idea. And for what it's worth, I think that gender recognition certificates should only be given to people who've had operations. I don't think they should be given to people who simply decide that they are a different sex. I think that doesn't make any sense.
No.
But on that happy note, and I hope Ofcom compliant note, I'd better thank my panel. In a moment, the ancient right of Britons to be tried by their fellow citizens is at risk as calls grow to replace jury trials with magistrate trials.
Evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. Here on GB News, the fog thickening up in places overnight and slow to clear across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland in particular tomorrow. Elsewhere, much of England and Wales is dry and cloudy. High pressure is keeping things that way. Not many big changes with the weather, but the wind's still coming in from the northeast, still feeding in a few showers across southeast England overnight. Elsewhere, as I said, most places dry, bit of drizzly rain heading into Shetland, but it's the fog thickening up across southwest Scotland and the west of Northern Ireland that could cause some problems. Freezing fog as temperatures fall well below freezing. We could see negative double digits through some sheltered glens across Scotland. That fog, particularly in and around Glasgow and across the west of Northern Ireland, may stick around for all of tomorrow. Certainly a dull, damp and drizzly start across Shetland, but actually some of the highest temperatures here to begin the day. We could be -9, -10 through some of the sheltered glens across Scotland. A cold start for Northern Ireland. That fog, particularly in the west, again, stubborn and slow to clear. And this cloud is pretty stubborn across England and Wales. Maybe some breaks in the cloud across northwest Wales, the far northwest of England. So chance of a bit of sunshine here and there, but mostly just staying cloudy. But largely dry. It's in the far south where we'll continue just to see a few showers and still a fairly brisk and chilly wind. Elsewhere, the wind's pretty light, generally a bit lighter than today. Temperatures still touch below average, 6 or 7 Celsius for most. Sunnier skies for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but temperatures here only 4 or 5 at best. And again, where that fog sticks, we're not going to get above freezing. Some of that fog thickening up again Wednesday night into Thursday morning. So again, that could be slow to clear on Thursday. Thicker cloud across these eastern and central parts of England on Thursday. Some drizzly rain is likely here, so quite dank. And again, not feeling very warm with temperatures, for the most part, single digits.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about.
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Well, we were talking about Ipso and the Spectator, and the Mailmogs have come zooming in. Andy says, surely we need some form of press regulation, otherwise it's merely the Wild West. How will journalistic standards be upheld? Not, I think, by Ipso, actually. I think by consumers who may not buy things that they think are untrue. And Paul, I wonder how Kelvin Mackenzie would have fared under the tyrannical rule of Ipso. And Trevor, is it not time to abolish all the press regulators, including Ofcom? That's a brave view, one I may have a certain sympathy with. Anyway, Henry II first introduced the jury system through the Assize of Clarendon, revolutionising the British legal system. Henry decreed that suspects should be tried by their peers, in his words, 12 of the more lawful men, who would allow for a democratic element to be inserted into the judicial process. Despite his many strengths, Henry II clearly lacked the foresight that 8 centuries on, our legal system would be so stymied by bureaucracy, his system would be under threat. Lord Thomas, the former Lord Chief Justice, has argued that jury trials for Crown Court cases should be scrapped in order to tackle backlogs and delays. Well, I'm joined now by one of the foremost legal commentators and experts, Joshua Rosenberg, KC. Joshua, thank you so much for coming in. The jury system is the bedrock of freedom, isn't it? That you can't just be tried by agents of the state, that the state has the police, it has the prosecution service, it pays the judges. If they decide your guilt or innocence, you have no independent element.
Yes, but don't forget that 90% of cases are tried not by the state, but by either lay magistrates or by district judges. And the suggestion is not to scrap jury trial altogether, but to reduce the availability of it and perhaps find some other way of trying cases which are currently tried by juries.
But it's always being chopped away at, isn't it, that we haven't had any expansion of trial by juries in modern history. The limits have been brought in, the ability to opt has been restricted 20 or 30 years ago. And it's not, unfortunately, a party political thing. I can't just blame the Labour Party. I think Margaret Thatcher's government wanted to limit some of the abilities to choose trial by jury.
Yes, past governments of both main political parties have tried and failed because it's such an important thing. The question now is whether we've got to such a state that this is the best option. And I think a lot of people think it is.
But isn't the fact that we've got to such a state because the courts work pretty short hours?
No.
They don't, well, they sit 10 to 3 or whatever it is.
They sit 10:30 to 4, but they don't work 10:30 to 4. And of course, you can't have jury trials unless you bring the defendants, and they've got to be brought, and the delays in bringing them from prisons all over the country, particularly if they're being kept a long way away from the court where they're being tried.
But this is administrative inefficiency, that you can surely have courts that are near where holding cells are for people to be brought in, that we don't have assizes going around the country anymore. You can have the prison near the court if you structure yourself. having done jury service some years ago, actually in what is now the Supreme Court building, the Middlesex Guildhall, I was absolutely appalled by the extraordinary time wasting, that you have long periods of just sitting around waiting, and the inefficiency, and this is about 20 years ago, was striking.
You as a juror have to wait because often there is legal argument in the absence of the jury. You as a juror have to wait because you may be called to trial and you may be asked to stand down, as you would have in those days. So you need a jury panel in waiting of more numbers than are going to be used. So, yes, it's inefficient, but that's the only way it can be made to work.
But the judge then wants his lunch and you've got not much left to do, and the judge says it's lunchtime. It's all those sorts of things that it seems to me the judges could work a little bit harder to get through some of the backlog.
You look at the amount of work they do behind the scenes, and jurors have to have lunch too.
Yeah, but they can wait half an hour. It's just a question. It seems to me that justice is being sacrificed on the altar of efficiency, and governments always try to become efficient, and they never are. It won't make things more efficient. It will just lead to delays somewhere else.
Well, I'm not sure about that. I mean, the last government, without being too political about it, has left the current government, it would say, in a position where there are delays of 2, 3, 4 years in trials. Obviously, complainants lose interest. Obviously, witnesses disappear. And the question is whether you are going to have as many trials by jury as you have at the moment, or whether you are going to have those cases that should be tried by jury, the most important ones, rape, murder, manslaughter, serious assaults, and get those tried quickly so that they don't fall by the wayside.
But if you cut out jury trials for other things, you are risking people's livelihoods, their reputations, possibly even a prison sentence for something where they're not getting complete justice. They are getting administrative justice.
I don't think the Magistrates Association would agree with that.
Of course they wouldn't. The magistrates always want more power, and they want more power to give out...
And they've been given it by the present government. They can now send you to prison for 12 months.
12 months, which was a temporary COVID measure, which I was very pleased went back to 6 months, because to take somebody's liberty away for 12 months is not something that should be decided by officialdom. It should have a jury.
They're not officials. They are lay people, and those who are not lay people are judges.
But the old stipendiary magistrates,
yes,
district judges,
yes.
they are. They're paid.
No, they are members of the judiciary, just like Crown Court judges.
But I don't trust the judiciary to be deciding guilt or innocence. I want my reputation in the hands of 12 good men and true.
One of the options being suggested, being discussed, is that cases which are currently tried in the Crown Court by a judge and jury would be tried by a judge with 2 lay magistrates. And that judge in the Crown Court might be a circuit judge, the people who normally sit in the Crown Court, or might be a district judge.
But these are people who have drunk from the fount of officialdom, that even the lay magistrates, they have become part of the establishment. And if you are somebody who's challenged that, or you're unpopular with that, what chance do you have of justice? And one of the great safeguards of the jury system is that it makes every so often eccentric decisions that the officials in the court cannot understand, but those are the saviours of our liberty.
Well, maybe, and it's perfectly true that juries take sympathy on some defendants in some circumstances and acquit in the face of the evidence, and nobody would suggest otherwise. But I come back to your main point, which is that trial by magistrate is not trial by officials. Obviously, there are officials involved in the court.
Well, it is if they're the stipendiary ones, if they're the district judges.
Well, they would deny it. They are independent of the government. They have security of tenure. They are answerable to the judicial hierarchy. They're answerable to the
But they're paid by the state.
Well, all judges are paid by the state.
Absolutely. So judges are they're independent in their judicial role.
Yes.
But they are part of the establishment. They're not outside it. And if you think that the CPS only brings cases which it thinks are in the public interest and that there is a good prospect of a successful conviction. Now, if that is going to judges who have been part of that system, then surely the chance of conviction in front of a judge must be higher.
Not if they've been on the inside and they've seen what's gone wrong, and they may be less sympathetic to the prosecution than they were.
But they will be part of a system that knows that the CPS only brings prosecutions under these circumstances. They will look at it in the same way, the same intellectual approach as the lawyers in the CPS?
Well, there is a risk of that, but they would say that they are independent and they prove themselves to be independent, and, as you say, it's not up to them at the moment in the Crown Court, it's up to the jury.
Yes.
But on the other hand, the judge directs the jury, the judge can take the case away from the jury, the judge can't tell the jury to convict, but certainly can tell the jury to acquit.
Can tell them to acquit, yes. But that's fine, because the jury is there to protect the innocent from a false accusation.
Right. I mean, I don't want to suggest that I don't support the jury system. I do. I accept that it is the fount of our liberties. The question is, can we afford to have so many cases tried by juries? Can a person choose to be tried by jury for a minor assault, a minor theft?
But the fundamental thing is, can we afford? And this is a question of priorities.
Yes.
We can definitely afford it if the government wishes to fund a little bit more for the Crown Court.
Yes, but there's an announcement today on building new prisons. That'll take 10 years. And we haven't got the resources to try these people quickly enough because of the lack of
But this is
facilities.
choice. It's a government choice not to have the resources.
Well,
I mean, there are other things they could do or not do.
The present government will tell you it's spending more than the last government and is trying to create prison places, which the last government failed to do. It will say. It is a matter of choice. Of course it is.
Yeah.
You could provide a system where everybody was tried by jury, in principle.
But liberty is fundamental. That's the thing. I mean, of all the things government does, a fair justice system is fundamental.
I agree with that, totally. And again, I don't want to be too political, but the argument is that the last government has underfunded justice by underfunding legal aid and so on, and that is the reason that we're in the state we're in.
Element of COVID. But on that note,
yes, that's perfectly true.
Better leave it. But thank you very much to Joshua. We will be back shortly to discuss the parish system. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
So, how did you get into radio initially?
It's the old thing. You do discos.
Yeah.
Back in the days when you used to put needles on.
What sort of year we're talking about?
Oh, it was black and white.
Okay.
That's the closest you're going to get.
Beatles, Rolling Stones?
Yeah. Sort of later than... Yeah, sort of a bit later than that, doing discos. But then you sort of do a tape. I did a tape for BBC Radio Manchester, the local BBC station. And just one off, got a copy of that, edit. Yeah. Naively thought, everybody's going to send a tape to Piccadilly, which was the Manchester station, which was 73. And instead of that, a couple of years later, I sent a tape to Radio City in Liverpool, not thinking that everybody in Liverpool's going to be sending a tape there. And just a guy just went, I'm too good for this, doing the overnights, walked out, and my tape was on the top of the pile. And I got a phone call on a Thursday night, Thursday, the 12th of February, 76. Can you do 2 till 6 in the morning on Radio City in Liverpool? I thought it was one of my pals.
And what was you talking about on that radio show?
It was an overnight programme, so it's music.
Yeah.
In those days, you didn't have much needle time, but clever devil here noticed that the BBC stuff was not needle time.
Yeah.
So I used to put, like, the Goons on and the Hancocks. So you've got half an hour, and me and the security guy, Bert, on the door. We're the only two in the building. Yeah. I used to get in my car, put the Goons on, get in my car, dash down to the pier head, get a bacon butty, listening to it all the time, hoping that the record's not stuck, and then dashing back.
GB News, the People's Channel. Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Well, we're talking about the importance of the jury system, and the mail mogs have come in. Andrew says, Jacob, do you include judges as part of the blob? Yes, very much so, particularly though she's now retired Baroness Hale, who was the blob incarnate. Phil says, do you worry about people being pushed to take pleas rather than going to trial? Absolutely. Plea bargaining is one of the worst aspects of American justice. And Nicholas brilliantly says, as Hancock asked, and that's Hancock as in Hancock's half hour, not Matt Hancock, Magna Carta, did she die in vain? The parish church plays an essential yet often undervalued role in British life and has done so for centuries. As well as providing religious and spiritual sustenance, they are a vital part of local communities, especially in rural areas. Yet in the past 50 years, over 2,000 churches have closed and clergy numbers have fallen. This is partly because of declining congregations, but also the mismanagement of the Church of England. Local funding has been cut and moves have been made to establish a centralised bureaucracy. The issue continues to affect millions across the country, and a recent report from Esme Partridge has highlighted the challenges and proposed solutions. I'm joined by her now. Esme, thank you very much for coming in. I was fascinated by your report because one of the things you seem to indicate as part of the problem is an Act of Parliament passed in 1976 that took away revenue from parishes. What was the effect of that?
1976 Endowments and Glebe measure. So in the Middle Ages, from the Middle Ages onwards, parish churches essentially were able to finance themselves through local congregations. They also tended to own a lot of land. And so the income generated from that land could go to augment the living of the area and, of course, pay for the parish priest. Now, this was deemed to be unequal, and indeed there were huge differences between wealthier parishes, poorer parishes. Some are able to give the priest a good salary, others aren't. And so in the interests of fairness, in 1976, all of the assets, all of the land owned by parish churches were transferred to the diocese, so that's the sort of administrative centre of the church. And since then, there's been arguably a disempowerment of the parishes within the church.
And so this meant that there was money not just to pay the local vicar or the local rector to make sure that the rectory was looked after, but also that some of the church repairs could be done.
Absolutely. Currently, there's a huge backlog of repairs on churches at the moment, exceeding millions of pounds. And in 2017, the National Lottery funding, which had been ring-fenced for religious buildings, was withdrawn. So if you think of all those poor churches, they are no longer can fundraise as effectively as they used to be able to, and are in a situation where they're really crumbling and falling apart.
And so the money is now what with the church commissioners?
So the church commissioners, yes, they have a £10.4 billion fund. That's increased over the years through investments. But ironically, that money originally came from a pot of money called the Queen Anne's Bounty, established in 1704. Now, this was essentially a system of welfare for parishes. Richer parishes would pay into it in order to provide clergy for poor parishes. Now, when this money was handed to the church commissioners in 1948, as you can possibly imagine, the money starts to be used for other things. And indeed, millions of pounds have been spent on things outside of the parish. And
well, they're going to give some of it for slavery reparations, aren't they?
Yes, although that's kind of one example when actually this is a trend that's been ongoing for about 20 years, this divestment basically away from the parish.
So this is absolutely great if you're a bishop, because you're now getting all this money to spend on having assistant under-secretaries to support the under-secretary and all of that bureaucracy that's been ballooning in the church.
Pretty much. So I think the Diocese of Oxford has about 6 communications officers. Diocese of Bristol has something like 9 people in external relations. And you think, well, there are people in the churches.
I thought your external relation was with God, if you were a clergyman. But...
Well, indeed. I mean, I think nationally, the ratio of clergy who are in the church, on the ground, giving out the Eucharist, being that spiritual shepherd for people in the communities, for every 3.5 of those, you have 1 administrator. So, and in some dioceses, it's more like 50-50, the ratio of basically administrative staff to actually parish clergy on the ground. So I think, as you'd probably agree, it's a huge imbalance, really, when at the end of the day, people's experience of the church, it's not head office, it's not the HR department. Much of those things are arguably important in the 21st century. It is the parish priest.
But congregations in cathedrals are doing pretty well, as I understand it, particularly the ones that have great music, and that obviously costs money. Congregations in rural parishes, calypso.
Well, I think part of the problem is that the strong local attachments upon which the parish system was originally premised, they no longer exist in the same way. It's what David Goodhart talks about. We have, instead of somewheres, people who have that really strong connection to their parish, to their local area. We have more people, particularly middle-class people, who are more sort of anywheres. I think there are many factors at play here. I don't think that's the only one, but I think that's one of the reasons why these rural churches are really struggling. The community as a whole is really on decline.
And some of these churches prior to 1976 would have had enough money to attract a good vicar who would have gone round, built up the congregation, would have been part of the structure of that village, and that's just been sacrificed.
Absolutely. And the other factor is, if you have someone who lives in a village, is attached to that parish church for their whole life, and they die, back in those days, what would they do? They'd probably give a large sum of money in their will. Under the 1976 measure, if they give money to the church, unless there's some special fund set up or there's some kind of hoop that you have to jump through to go around the sort of back door, that money will go to the diocese. Now, if every diocese was primarily spending all of its money on parish clergy, you'd think, well, I guess that's okay, because that means more parish priests of the area. The issue is that increasingly it's not primarily, well, a lot of it isn't being spent on that, put it that way.
It's absolutely classic. Everyone thinks centralising is a good thing. It just means money is wasted at the centre rather than at the parish.
Absolutely, and I think particularly thinking about the last 10, 20 years, I think the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, I think that has been his approach. It has been running it like a business, and that centralisation is what he believes to be the right strategy. And I think people like Save the Parish criticising this really make the point that actually it's not people's experience of the church, it is their local parish.
But I probably shouldn't say this, but the answer is given back to Holy Mother, because they were pinched off us in the 16th century. But there we go. Thank you very much, Esme. Up next is Patrick Christys. Patrick, what's on your programme this evening?
Well, I'm afraid to say it is an especially important show tonight, Jacob, mainly because there's a report out that calls me and other GB News presenters Islamophobic and an anti-Muslim hate channel. There are serious and defamatory inaccuracies in this report, and I will be taking those very seriously on my show. I'm also going to be talking about first cousin marriage, because bizarrely, our government of the day, the Labour government, does not appear to have a position when it comes to, for want of a better phrase anyway, sleeping with your first cousin. I've also got two exclusives for you, but you'll have to wait and see what they are.
Well, that's excellent. I had a wonderful email on first cousin marriage, which says, my grandmother, an enthusiastic and successful flat horse race breeder, discussed this with the vet. Hello, my lady, you can do it once, but don't make a habit of it. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, this has been State of the Nation, and the weather in Somerset, West Hertfordshire particularly, with a lovely parish church, will be beautiful, spectacular.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. Here on GB News, the fog thickening up in places overnight and slow to clear across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland in particular tomorrow. Elsewhere, much of England and Wales is dry and cloudy. High pressure is keeping things that way. Not many big changes with the weather, but the wind's still coming in from the northeast, still feeding in a few showers across southeast England overnight. Elsewhere, as I said, most places dry, bit of drizzly rain heading into Shetland, but it's the fog thickening up across southwest Scotland and the west of Northern Ireland that could cause some problems. Freezing fog as temperatures fall well below freezing. We could see negative double digits through some sheltered glens across Scotland. That fog, particularly in and around Glasgow and across the west of Northern Ireland, may stick around for all of tomorrow. Certainly a dull, damp and drizzly start across Shetland, but actually some of the highest temperatures here to begin the day. We could be -9, -10 through some of the sheltered glens across Scotland. A cold start for Northern Ireland. That fog, particularly in the west, again, stubborn and slow to clear. And this cloud is pretty stubborn across England and Wales. Maybe some breaks in the cloud across northwest Wales, the far northwest of England. So chance of a bit of sunshine here and there, but mostly just staying cloudy. But largely dry. It's in the far south where we'll continue just to see a few showers and still a fairly brisk and chilly wind. Elsewhere, the wind's pretty light, generally a bit lighter than today. Temperatures still touch below average, 6 or 7 Celsius for most. Sunnier skies for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but temperatures here only 4 or 5 at best. And again, where that fog sticks, we're not going to get above freezing. Some of that fog thickening up again Wednesday night into Thursday morning. So again, that could be slow to clear on Thursday. Thicker cloud across these eastern and central parts of England on Thursday. Some drizzly rain is likely here, so quite dank. And again, not feeling very warm with temperatures, for the most part, single digits.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's our festive treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £50,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest ever Great British giveaway. What would you spend £50,000 on in the coming year? Spectacular holidays, a brand new car, home improvements? Or maybe you'd just like to save it for a special occasion? For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do think differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to